Hello and welcome to this live stream on Retrotopia, a kind of making of report in a context of how Retrotopia fits into sci-fi visions in live music video performance. It's kind of a field report from futures that never arrived, and at the very beginning I'm gonna kind of try to define, or at least show you, what is Retrotopia. Alright, I'm gonna skip ahead on that one because you've seen most of that before, and that video is more for people who has no idea what it's about. But I would define Retrotopia for me as kind of immersive hauntology. I'm gonna get back to that word hauntology later and define that more properly, but that's kind of like the presence of absence in a very short definition. And for me, it's a live audiovisual performance system based on a multiverse of science fiction futures, kind of like all of sci-fi history. And this system and all of these universes are questioning around dreams of tomorrow. This is presented as a concert, like a physical concert, as a media installation. It's also interactive live streams, which is where we usually see each other. And it's also a musical album on vinyl, and it's now also an academic presentation which I did at the University of Oslo during NorCon in the middle of June a few weeks ago. So for tonight I'm gonna quickly give an introduction of myself with some data that you know me already, but there's some data that is relevant for the concept of Retrotopia, and then I'm going to talk about why and how I did Retrotopia on kind of like a theoretical level. I'm going to talk some of the concept and the story of everything in that project and show a bit on how it was made. Like, I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'm going to show you like superficially how I did it. And towards the end of that, once I've shown you all of the practical stuff, we're going to talk a bit about how do futures decay. And if there's time at the very end, we can have some Q&A. You can post your comments in the chat. So briefly, my definition, my simulation system identifier in this simulation is Gisle Mattensmeyer, and my process was launched in 1975. This is relevant because that makes me an 80s child and a 90s teenager, and as an artist I had my breakthrough in the early 2000s. And as a kid in the 80s, my first exposure to sci-fi were these novels by the Norwegian author John Bing, and they made a profound impression on me as a kid. I was blown away by it, and that kind of opened all kinds of doors, and these books are probably the reason I'm standing here right now and we are talking to each other over digital connection. It's spread all over the planet. Of course, not only these books were influential, but they were the first, and kind of like they opened the portal to the rest. And here's some of the other more formative books of the 80s and 90s. And here you see my impeccable sci-fi credentials of all the books I've read on library thing. 416, by far the most, is sci-fi, and fantasy is on a nice second place with 133. The 90s were also formative, not only with fiction, but also I discovered media theory and industrial music, like Frontline Assembly is my favorite band, but also Front 242 and the rest of that scene of the 90s with media critical and system critical music. And the demo scene, which I'm not going to go in depth of with here, but that was like a way of pushing technology forward with art and entertainment, and always doing it in real time. This is important. We're going to look at that later. Here's some pictures of me, and the point of showing you this is me in the 90s, the first when I started working with computers and music, and this is from the first concert in 2000. Observe here, there's a computer and horrible colors on the curtains in the background. Again, in 2000, there's a questionable curtain in the background, and here's this year with everything is bigger, but it's questionable stuff everywhere, and there's a lot of computers everywhere. So my instrument is computers, and my themes are digital culture and technology. And I am fascinated with screens. This is live on stage, and I'm communicating with the audience through screens. So I'm looking at camera. Here is a better look of that. I'm looking directly into a camera, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm talking to you through a camera, and you are seeing me on a screen. If this was in a concert hall like this, I would be looking directly at you, and I would be relating quotes and media system information and critical questions to you, but through a screen. There's this layer between us, which I find super fascinating. And this is important because this is a big part of Retrotopia, and I'm going to talk a little bit now about my artistic process, because that explains also the process of Retrotopia. And for me, I work with art in systems. I see systems as art more than kind of like a song is a piece of art, a photo or a film or whatever, but I also see systems as art. And in these systems that I build, everything is always live. Everything I do is always real time. Of course, if there's a movie clip, the film is not being made in real time behind me. The clip is pre-recorded and used, but it's used in a live context. It's triggered live from disk, it's processed live. And this comes from my demo scene background. Oh, there's Christian. Hello. Nice of you to connect. Perfect. And in these systems that I build, I'm fascinated with recursion, like putting another system inside the system. The system becomes a repetitive system of itself. And then how interesting information and new kinds of both another system emerges from that. And inside of these systems, I build walls and stories that are visible to me, like they're in my head or in my concepts and in my notes. And then I play or I score or I design and animate around this. And I curate, perform, and publish in this sequence. So I build something in this system, and then I curate, okay, that stuff, that thing there, that's kind of interesting. I polish it a bit, I perform that, and then I publish that segment. And for me then, a public work, when you get a song on an album or a video on YouTube, that is just a system snapshot. That's something I took out. I could do it again and it would be slightly different or completely different, but that's kind of like my published works are just snapshots. And that's also then the process of Retrotopia. And for me, at the top, or it's not the top, it's kind of like at the beginning, I develop a multiverse, a mythology, lots of characters, and they all have stories, and there's a lot of stuff happening in that world. But when that gets out to you as just a snapshot of my system, you only see glimpses, fragments, kind of small hints of what's actually there in the background. And this is by design. I don't want you to know everything because I don't think that my totality actually holds up. It's more of a framework for me to develop stuff. And I do this in this very easy process of I start with an idea and a concept, and then I develop that into a sketch and a prototype, or many, like it's not just one. And I test that then out in these internet live streams that we have every month or every second month or so. And there I test music and visuals and ideas and technologies. And when something works there, I scale that up to concerts. I test it out on a live stage. And when that works, I kind of, okay, that's going to be released as a song or as an album or as a music video or something. And for Retrotopia, the top part there is the same as I showed you earlier with, like, at the beginning I have my multiverse and my mythology and my characters, but you only see glimpses and fragments of that in the concerts and in the releases. I will show you examples of this later. So up until now, for you guys who has seen my work, you have seen parts of this process, but you have never seen all of it. And that's what I'm going to talk about for tonight. It's this top level stuff that happens only in my world before you see it. I'm quite certain by now most of you will have fallen asleep, so here I'm going to show you a video to keep you entertained. This is just an excerpt from Radio Aurora, and this is from the era of 1914's Latin American magical realism, or the futurism of the mid-century magical realism.
There is a book where every page is a mirror, and every mirror is a book.
So why did I make Retrotopia? Well, I love sci-fi, and this was a great way to work deeply into all kinds of sci-fi and study the whole history of science fiction. And I have this inborn nostalgia for lost futures and also for extinct technology. And I'm fascinated with hauntology. That kind of like resonates so profoundly with me. And I think what is super interesting is that if you look at systems, again, if you look at the history of science fiction, each era of science fiction has their own monsters, their own hopes, their own kind of like fascination with technology. What they think is going to be the future will show you what that contemporary time thought was problematic or what they had hopes for. And when you see that over time, when you see that repeat as a system, you recognize the system of fear. You recognize the system of hope, and you see that over time, and from that you can interpolate and you can draw conclusions about your own fears and your own hopes. And that is super interesting. So how I did Retrotopia is with, of course, I did a fuck ton of research. I gathered as many sci-fi references as I could, and I built a huge library for myself and a lot of information. I looked at a lot of novels and films and art and media, not just from each era, but also meta information, like books about sci-fi and books about the history of science fiction. And from that, I developed, as I showed you earlier, a system that I put everything into this system. I'm going to show you the system very shortly. And I build a mythology, characters and stories in that system. And from that I build prototypes, which becomes works in progress, which then become songs and videos. This is not a linear process. It's not like I start this and I do all of this from A to Z and then it's finished. It's completely chaotic. It's only now, 2 years later, I can tell you this is how I did it. But when I start, the idea builds together with the system. Everything is growing at the same time. And I do a lot of research and I gather a lot of references. And of course, I have a gigantic spreadsheet for all of that. Here you can, I think this is not possible to read on live stream 720p resolution, but let's use some modern technology and enhance. And here you can see a bit more, like just a tiny detail. You can see like I have the different eras on the left there with all kinds of, like, I have a description of that era. I have what kind of hauntological elements there are, what emotional tone would I like to embed in this era, what are the archetype antagonists, what are the archetype monsters, references, what kind of seminal works belongs to that era, what kind of music did they use, what are the visual aesthetics of the films, etc., etc. here is the list I then define of all of these eras, starting at kind of like you have the proto sci-fi of multiple centuries. I'm not going into that so much in the project, but I just define it for myself. And you can see that in the 18th, excuse me, in the 19th century, it starts growing with defined eras. And then when you enter the previous century, the 20th century, it starts kind of exploding with different genres. And when we get into our own century, there's a lot of new genres of science fiction. For each era and each genre, I then do a lot of research. I gather a lot of visual material, stories, music, if there is any, sounds, voices, films. I just gather as much as possible. And of course, I'm not able to work with every single era, even if I would like to. Maybe this project continues. I'm not gonna kind of define that right now. But these are the eras that I ended up working with. It's not all of them. There's 53 in total, and I think I work with about half of them. And I'm now going to show you a bit about the structure. I will just grab a breath and a drink. So the Retrotopia structure, as I told you, it has a multiverse at the very top. It's a multiverse story, which is kind of fashionable right now, and it's going to be old very soon. And in this multiverse, there's the top level story of a protagonist and an antagonist, and there are minor characters. There is the main story or the main goal of the multiverse, and there's a lot of memories, emotions, and from all of that, because this is a musical project, there are sounds and melodies and themes. And then each era of this multiverse, again, here you have like the 60s new wave, the 90s VR, the modernist dystopias of the 20s, and etc., etc. Each of these eras again have their own characters, themes, visuals, and media. Again, let's use sci-fi technology and enhance, and look at one specific era, or just like this is the model of one era. This is not a specific one. This is just like the structure of all of them. They all have then characters that belong to just that era. I will show you examples of this. And these characters, through dialogue or monologues, expose the story or the theme of that era. There's the media. The kind of every era has its own media. Like you had cassettes in the 90s, you had the film reels of the 50s, you had the I haven't prepared a list of all the medias, but every technological era has their own media, as in we have the internet and streaming. In the 90s you had CDs and laser discs, and then you had mini discs. So these are all referenced, and you have the visual aesthetics, and you have the kind of creatures and effects and style of all of these. And I put this together in songs, music videos, and live events. And what is super important to note here is that all of this is based on archetypes. So the characters of an era are archetypes of that era. And the same goes for the visuals and the songs. I try to make everything like sound or look or seem like it belongs to that era. I'm going to go even deeper into more enhancement here and look specifically at this part, because this is where I think that the core of that is exposed. Each era has a story system, and that's similar for, like, the system is similar for each era, but what they talk about is slightly different. But they always talk about loss and confusion. There's a lot of insecurity and disconnection and confusement, if that's the word. And they talk about their memories and their emotions, but they do that in the context of their own technology and media and culture. And I expose this through stories that I write everything, the lyrics, and then I have characters that are built on voices ripped from movies. So what I do, I take all of the voices from the movies of that era, and then I create archetype voices from that, and these voices perform the lyrics that I write. And on purpose, I make them lo-fi, like they sound like they come from that era. So, like for example, we heard the 40s Borgesian Latin American sci-fi. That sounds like radio from that era, and I'm going to show you another example of. I think I have the example right here. Yes, the example is here. Like the 20s Soviet constructivism, I'm using then that art form as the background. Here's some examples of the background for that. And I also animate characters that kind of use the same visual aesthetic. And the lyrics for this track is a combination of the dystopian novel We by Yevgeny Samyatin and The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. So there's a product manager aboard the Integral, which is the main spaceship of the V novel. And this product manager keeps discovering ruby slippers aboard the spaceship with cryptic notes that leads her on a goose chase outside the city where she's finding the Emerald Wall. I'm not going to explain too much of this, but she doesn't understand what she's finding. I'm just going to tell you, like, this is the setup of all of it. I'm not going to explain to you why I'm doing this, or that gets wrong. But let's just listen to it. This is Differential Ruby Slipper from the 1920s Soviet constructivism era.
A perplexing anomaly. A single ruby slipper aboard the Integral. I found the ancient house, broken walls of glass. Inside, a scarecrow.
And here's another example from the other side of the century. This is 90s biopunk, kind of dealing with genetic engineering.
The era of gene nexus. Biotechnology had not just reshaped the human body, but had redefined the very essence of nature. This world was a living laboratory, a tapestry, genetic artistry, where DNA was both medium and masterpiece.
So that's the setup of the different tracks. They all have characters exposing the narratives or the kind of tiny ideas and memory loss of each era. And of course, the main story of Retrotopia also has a story. And that is very simple. It's there are multiple characters, and they all hunt for the one true memory, the one memory that will make the future come true. Like, what is the memory of the future that is actually true? And that is the true memory of the future is hunted by opposing forces, of course, to make a story happen. There's a protagonist, and that's me, or that's actually us, like a first-person view of the story. And that's done through a character that, for me, I call him Yabatai, or I title him Yabatai. I'll get back to that later. He's kind of like an explorer, archivist, and he's exploring all of these era. He visits an era, collects the dead media of that era. He runs into these ghosts, these characters that are exposing the story of that era. And he narrates and reports back to us what he finds. And the opposing force is Mamba Antax, which is a faceless big company. They are similar to Yabatai. He's they are all scraping these eras for memories, but Yabatai is collecting them for archival purposes and he's studying them. But Mamba Antax is collecting them for scraping and extracting the emotions from all of the memories. Yabatai is kind of a media hunter. That's the word comes from two. It's a portmanteau of two Japanese words that could together be read as media hunter, and he's, of course, peak trash cosplay. It's the costume in itself. I'm going to show you this very shortly how I made that. But he explores these eras alone. He is traveling all by himself and collects the dead media. The references for this costume is put myself over there, Blade Runner, and I can't. Her name Shora, the snake replicant, has a transparent coat, and that's the main reference. But also, the time traveler outfits in 12 Monkeys is a huge influence on Yabatai's outfit. And here's from the first concert where I tested it out. This was in Tromsø a few years ago. And this is backstage just before going on stage. Here's another prototype, me testing it at home. Kind of like just testing out projection on plastic, the umbrellas, testing out the costume, like does this work? Can I see anything? Oops, and let's just run that again until the green screen and do not press button. And here you see me testing out in front of a green screen and just filming myself handling media and moving around the environments, which then is tested out. Here you see I'm testing out inserting myself into early prototypes of just like navigating these scenes. And then here's what it looks like on stage.
Despise these message things. I'm just...
So I think in the context, his costume is cheap and trashy, and it's yeah, but that works in context. And what I've discovered in a long career of working is that when something is trashy, everything looks great when you make it big, and that's kind of one of my core mantras. Just make it big. As long as it's big and massive, everything looks impressive. Also, if you're trashy. So if I build a stage and fill it with trash and lots of transparent umbrellas and projection, and I project trashy landscape on that, it's gonna look impressive and it's gonna be awesome. And that's kind of how it works. But this is not just, I'm not doing that not just for trash. There's a purpose to why I do this. I'm gonna show you this. Here's another reference image from the similar setup with the transparent umbrellas and the coats and stuff. And here's the reference for that. Again, Blade Runner, and observe the umbrella with the glow stick in the background there in the center of the image, and take a look here how I am recreating that look with the transparent. You see there are, it's not transparent glow sticks, but the umbrellas are kind of connected to these LED strips that echo the same kind of aesthetic or image. So here's another example of how this is one of the other earlier prototypes of Yabatai walking around. This is from the 60s plastic fantastic space age. And I think what I always make it I make it difficult for myself because I insist on always doing everything live, and that's why it's often the graphics are often lo-fi and the frame rate is low, because everything in those images are live. Like the character is live, the backgrounds are live, the animation is live, and we are inserting ourselves. I'm inserting you like I do right now live, and that's taxing the computer quite a lot. And I'm always hoping for more powerful computers so it would be smooth. But at the moment the computer is powerful, I add more stuff to it. So I'm like always at the low frame rates. Let's just briefly talk about the antagonist of this universe or this multiverse. The antagonist of this is Mamba Antax. And I'm not going to explain that. I'm just going to give you a list of companies. And I'm also going to point out that I'm not saying that this antagonist is evil, but the archetype of big faceless companies are often that in science fiction. So just by archetype, a big faceless company gets applied this kind of antagonist position in a story like this. And I'm exposing this kind of information very subtly. Here's from one of the concerts. Before the concert starts, there's a soundscape and a media installation.
We are Mamba Antax.
So again, here's an example of using these voices that expose information to you. And if you puzzle everything together, you could figure this out. Here's the quote he's performing. We are Mamba Antax, your history, our machinery, your memory, our industry. So there are kind of hints of this. There are on the album, especially the director's cut version of the album. But probably more of this is exposed in the concert. So if you go to the concerts, you'll get exposed to more of the backstory. It's not important for me that nobody has to grok all of this. It's how I build it. It's important for me, and I then express my work through that system and through that multiverse. It's not important that people get that. There's also some minor characters. Let's make this big. There's the yokai, which are kind of shape-shifting spirits. Again, this is based on Japanese mythology. They assist or trick Yabatai in each of these universes. They come from Japanese folklore, and they kind of is the spirits that are imbued in daily technology or all kinds of things, mountains or rocks or water, and they either help you or they trick you. There's also the Ragnajala Tanti. For me, that's those mechanical spiders you have seen every now and then. They weave and control the pathways between all of the eras because they control the webs. Those are based on Hindu mythology. And I also had these Valkyrians and Nifflers. You might remember I had some kind of Valkyrie fighters with pagers. For a little while there, I dropped this because this was too complex, and I still think it's a good idea, but it was too much work to make it integrated well into the project. Here are then two demos that show you the yokai. These are in Langor Parlor in the 2010 Solarpunk era. And here they are then on stage. This is Reckon with the Fury a few months ago in Bergen. This is the 60s era, early science fiction from India. So right here we are now at on stage. So let's take a note on the stage setup. And look at my references for this stage. That's Johnny Mnemonic. Put my mini screen over there. And again, 12 Monkeys and all of the multi-screen setups. I'm also very influenced by Terra Gilliam's Brazil. And generally, I would say, being a child of the 70s, then the 80s and 90s dystopias that I could watch on late night television when my parents thought I was sleeping, they were a big influence on my aesthetic right now, I think. And also television shows like Max Headroom, but also media artists like Nam June Paik has been a big influence. And not just the movie itself, but also specific scenes. Here's a key moment in 1984, and how big faces are kind of blown up, shown to control kind of the audience. And I'm echoing this in my setup. It's a bit difficult to see with all the lighting here, but I'm appearing on all of the screens. You also see the tiny screens here. So with the modern AI technology, you can remove the background of me and insert just my character on all of these screens. Here's another angle that makes it more visible. So in real time, I'm pointing to the camera, yelling at the audience, and appearing on all of these screens around them. Here's an easier way to see the setup. We have 3 screens, a horizontal screen in the center and 2 vertical screens on each side. And let's take a look at the setup. Before the concert starts, there's a media installation running on this setup. Many of you have seen this video before. I posted this earlier, late last year. But here's just a close-up of kind of the references from Brazil, all of the piping, the kind of cables going everywhere, static noise, the desolate landscape of Stalker in the background, and all of these surveillance cameras. There are webcams everywhere, and they are all connected to the screen. So if you see now, I'm appearing on the iPad hanging in the Stalker world at the screen, being filmed as I walk around the stage, and the audience is doing the same. Like what the audience will suddenly see themselves appear in one of the eras of science fiction. Here's just a quick look at how this actually then looks in a performance. This is Life is Frozen Frame from Paktata last year. So that was Retrotopia, the kind of artistic process of bringing everything up on stage. And now you see the kind of the glimpses and fragments and hints that end up to the public. Now let's turn to the more theoretical part and talk about the science of this. And please observe, I'm now changing the font from a very kind of neutral font to a much more serious font. And let's talk about hauntology and how do futures decay. Hauntology is a concept or a term defined first by Jacques Derrida and later made kind of popular or more known by Mark Fisher. And simply put, it's the presence of absence. It's how I have a good definition of that. Let me find it. It's kind of the cultural condition of living in the shadow of lost futures. And it's the persistence of elements of the past futures are still haunting us today. And all of the unrealized futures behind us are kind of like continuously haunting us. And all of these retro eras, when we look back, the look of them, the feel of them, that has a deep emotional charge. And that is very effectful. Of course, and I'm using that. I'm kind of playing with that. I'm using that as raw material for my own art. And I think that our contemporary, our present, is becoming just a loop of past aesthetics, and I am doing that on purpose. But I'm wondering how many artists is not aware that they are doing that, and I think we are kind of stuck in perpetual recursion. There might not be any meaningful future. And for me, Retrotopia is kind of trying to show that, or kind of working with that, in the sense that I'm continuously showing you incomplete memories, and the characters in all of these worlds are also talking about how their own memories and emotions are disappearing for them. And there's this nostalgia and melancholia around that, which of course I love. I love melancholic melodies. And kind of the screens, again, endless screens. And how I always try to make everything disjointed and glitchy. Like, I'm not showing you everything. I'm doing it right now in this meta conversation. But all of the extinct media, everything you are exposed to in Retrotopia are kind of hauntological memories. And these memories are carrying or exposing you to these ghosts of lost eras. So each era in Retrotopia is simply a discarded vision of the future. And everybody in these eras, as well as the main characters in the upper multiverse, they're kind of trapped in these echoes of failed futures. And that leads us to the kind of realization that there is no perfect memory of the future. And that leads us to kind of think, are we trapped in the echo of our own failed future? Thank you.